Love this podcast? Support it and sponsor today. Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
Doctora Ramos a la sala de espera.
Hay un problema que afecta a muchos niños que no puedo resolver sola. Se llama estrés tóxico y esto aumenta el riesgo de problemas de salud. Pero hay pasos que los padres pueden tomar para superar el estrés tóxico. Aprende cómo en first5california.com.
Ozcast.
Hello world, I'm John Bruni and you're listening to Strategikon, your window to all things security and foreign affairs. In the midst of Australia's own struggle to push back against the Chinese Politburo's attempts at infiltrating the country's political system, and in the midst of the ongoing political crisis gripping Hong Kong, we return once again to the subject of East Turkestan, the Uyghur homeland, also known in the People's Republic as Xinjiang. Listeners of Strategikon are well familiar with the Uyghur cause since one of our interns and part-time research assistants, Ms. Shahrazad Gairat, has reported on this burning international issue for us for some time now. Recently, a leaked 400-page document was released by the New York Times outlining the scale of Uyghur persecution in the People's Republic of China. The document suggests that more than 1 million Uyghurs and Kazakhs have been detained in what are called re-education centers. This amounts to the first documented use by a developed state of such systematic persecution against a sectarian and ethnic minority since Nazi Germany and Soviet Russia. Who would have believed that in the first part of the 21st century, after the genocidal horrors of the 20th century, that human affairs could be so negatively impacted yet again? It raises the issue of whether our species can learn from past experience or whether there is something innate to our capacity to only selectively learn from the past when it is convenient to do so. Complicating matters further are the economic linkages between the People's Republic and the rest of the world, a world that is profiting handsomely from its trade and investment with the despotic Chinese Leviathan in ways that the world could not with the Nazi and Soviet states. While the West is struggling to figure out what to do with accommodating Beijing's internal and external behaviors, the Chinese Politburo seems intent on pressing its global economic and cultural advantages as political and strategic weapons, helped along by the grand ambitions of the current Chinese President Xi Jinping. To discuss these issues today, we are honored to have in the studio high-profile US-based Uyghur activist Ms. Rushan Abbas. Ms. Abbas has acted as linguist and translator for several US federal agencies, including the Department of Defense, and for President George W. Bush and former First Lady Laura Bush. From 2002 to 2003, she served at L3 as a consultant at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, supporting Operation Enduring Freedom. In 2017, Rushan Abbas founded the Campaign for Uyghurs to advocate and promote their human rights and democratic freedom. Under her organization, Ms. Abbas introduced and led the One Voice, One Step movement and successfully organized a demonstration on March 15, 2018, across 14 countries and 18 cities to protest China's detention of Uyghurs in concentration camps. Before we start today's episode, I would like to remind listeners that Strategikon can be found on the Ozcast network, iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, and on the Sage International Australia website, www.sageinternational.org.au. Rushan, welcome to Strategikon.
Thank you.
Rushan, I saw a recent video that you'd posted on Facebook about your sister. Can you please explain for our listeners a little bit about her background and what happened to her?
My sister, she retired in early age for the health reasons. She's a medical doctor. I talked about the atrocity the Uyghurs are facing today at a think tank in Washington, D.C. on September 5th, 2018, as one of the panelists. 6 days after I talked, my sister and my aunt both got abducted by the Chinese government as retaliation for my activism. They live about 1,400 kilometers away from each other. But on the same day, on September 11th, 2018, they both got abducted. My aunt was later released, but past 15 months, I have no information of my sister on her whereabouts.
Tell me, are you the only one from your immediate family who successfully managed to leave the People's Republic?
No, actually, both of my brothers, they live in America. Right. And then my sister's 2 daughters, 2 of my nieces, they both also live in America. So my sister, if I describe her a little bit, she is a very quiet person, always lived by the rules, never was an activist or outspoken person. So she came to visit her daughters and visited us in 2016. In August 2016, she returned back because she didn't think that she would be in any danger. Yet she became a victim for my activism as an American citizen, exercising my constitutional rights as a freedom of speech, freedom of expression. And now she's somewhere in the camps. Chinese government claiming that those are vocational training centers, but a medical doctor, retired medical doctor who speaks fluent Chinese doesn't need such a vocational training.
And more importantly, it's how potentially useful your sister is within the camp system potentially to look after people. She can speak Chinese, she can speak the relevant languages. She's potentially very useful, and while disappeared, can be made to behave. Something that's become very clear with sort of Chinese students in the US when they talk about the fact that they see the problems happening in East Turkestan and in Hong Kong and what happened to Tibet is that the view they develop on the outside, the ability to be free and think freely, is such a new thing that people who are used to being under authoritarian control struggle to think that they can escape it, can avoid it. Is there a degree of almost fatalism within the Uyghur community about what's happening at the moment? That because it's, the CCP are so organised, so good at being authoritarian, that, how do you confront it? Is there a feeling that the CCP are just too good at what they do?
No, I think we are being very effective. The Chinese government has prepared for this for years before they start these camps. The first, when we started to talk about the camps, they tried to deny it, tried to say the camps don't exist. But because of the Uyghur activists and advocates and Uyghur organizations working effectively with United Nations, with European Parliament, with American government, and in Australia too, the Australian Uyghur community working closely with Australian government, Chinese government started to admit, also they kept changing the narratives.
Yeah.
In August 2018, first time they admitted that they are re-education centers. And then 2 months later, they came back and said, oh, those are the vocational training centers. And then a couple of months later, said, oh, they are boarding schools. And now they are saying the people getting educated, they are able to come home and make phone calls to their family members. But again, we are telling the world about the reality. When the Chinese government is claiming those are the vocational training centers, we are telling the world that there are over 500 intellectuals, university presidents, writers, professors, pop stars, businessmen, famous singers, actors. So the Chinese government is completely lying about all this. Now the Chinese government is trying to fool the world again by taking reporters to the region for pre-orchestrated government-sponsored tours. In August, they sponsored more than a dozen Muslim reporters all around the world as a true witness to the failed propaganda system the Chinese government has. One of the Muslim scholar, Olsi Yazıcı from Albania, he went there to prove to the world that those camps are just the Western countries' propaganda against the growing Chinese economy and all that. But when he went there, when he interviewed the ordinary Uyghur people on the streets and the inmates from the concentration camps, Now he's being very outspoken and telling the world that he witnessed to real concentration camps and China is waging war on Islam.
You know, Rushan, we had the recent leaked Chinese documents to the New York Times, outlining the scale of Uyghur persecution. And you've got to forgive me for asking this, but can we actually verify the authenticity of the documents?
I believe it is real because that's nothing new than what we have been saying for the last few years. Yeah. And also, it confirmed what the journalists and the other human rights organizations have been saying about this atrocity. So there's no question about the authenticity of the documents. The only thing is now it's up to the world community to take action, because whoever leaked those documents, he or she wanted to make sure that perpetrators would get punished, and they wanted to make sure that the outside world has evidence. So yes, now we have confirmation. Now we have evidence. So what are we waiting for? Why are we not implementing the Global Magnitsky Act against the Chen Quanguo and the Xi Jinping and the other Communist Party leaders?
I think it's really interesting, but it speaks to a much larger issue. Obviously, China's under a bit of pressure internationally right now with what's going on in East Turkestan, what's going on in Hong Kong. It's always had a bleeding sore in the south and Tibet. But, if, for instance, this person was part of the Chinese apparatus and decided to leak these documents out, it speaks of something almost potentially catastrophic within the Politburo, that not everyone is voting for Mr. Xi's vision of China. What do you say about that?
When there's a dictatorship, when authoritarian government playing God, there are many people do not agree with him, but only because of the fear for repercussions, and since there's absolutely no freedom of speech or expression, so they may not come up forward and do something, but I'm sure there are many people do not agree with Xi Jinping's current policies. I hope that people inside of China, I hope that they realize soon what Xi Jinping is doing to Tibetans or the Uyghurs or what's happening in Hong Kong. What the Xi Jinping and the Chinese communists and the nationalist government is doing is not just persecuting the Uyghurs or Tibetans or cracking the freedom in Hong Kong. This is a crimes against humanity. They are challenging the Western democracy. They are challenging the integrity and the basic human rights of all people. They are starting from the Uyghurs, and they have done with Tibetans, as Chen Quanguo was the party secretary in Tibet first and moved to East Turkestan. But now they are exporting the system to other countries. And they are not only controlling the people in China, they are using their influence, their trade deals, their Belt and Road Initiative's power, and their debt trap diplomacy, trying to silence the entire world. So unless the Western democratic countries stand up and do something quickly before it's too late, this is going to undermine the democracy and the freedom that we enjoy in our part of the world.
I'm just wondering, there's been a lot of stuff going on in the media recently with regard to the Uyghur cause. And there was a story that I read recently about crematoria being set up next to some of the concentration camps. You would think that that would be a wake-up call, and I'm sure that now that we live in the space age, we can easily verify whether or not these things are actually happening with satellite intelligence and imagery and so on and so forth. What do you know about these rumors? I mean, are they also unsubstantiated, or is there some fact to it?
Yes, according to the government construction bids and the job announcements, there are massive crematorias are being built next to the concentration camps for a culture that doesn't practice cremation. What does that mean? Last time the world witnessed crematorias and the concentration camps together, an outright Holocaust took place. So what are we waiting for? Mass executions or gas chambers to wake up the world. So that should be the warning signs. But still, I am surprised, I am appalled to see the international communities still staying muted.
How much of a difference is it making at the moment that the Tibetans have been through, everything they've been through, and that they've been working out how to get public opinion and a public attention? Is this providing a much better opportunity in that with the Tibetans' decades of experience, that the Tibetans and Uyghurs are able to work very effectively together to shine a brighter light? Has this been a positive now that there are two groups who can talk about very similar experiences?
Yes, we would like to collaborate our efforts together as we have same enemy, the communist Chinese regime, the Tibetans, Falun Gong practitioners, Taiwanese, and the Hong Kong people. But when we look at the Tibetan cause and the Uyghur cause, the Tibetans, because of Dalai Lama, their case is known to the public. Yeah. But our case is more like top to bottom case. When you talk to the government officials or the experts or human rights organizations or journalists, they know what is going on. But if you talk to the Joe next door, the ordinary public, they still don't know. Majority of the people still don't know. So we have a lot of work to do with the grassroots organizations. That's what we are trying to do as a campaign for Uyghurs. Our concentration is raising awareness among the grassroots organizations, let the general public know, and then pressure their governments.
It's interesting. I had some visitors over last night, and we were having a discussion about, having you on Strategikon. And they said, "Oh, this is fantastic. So who are the Uyghurs and why are they persecuted?" And it's like, well, don't you read the newspapers? It's been all over the place. So I really can verify that there are a lot of educated people out there who are probably narrowly focused on a whole heap of other things, but the Uyghur cause is still very much a sort of peripheral issue for many of them, which then leads me to the next question, which is many governments are going to be shy of openly siding with the Uyghurs because of their trade with the People's Republic. But are you satisfied with the depth of support and sympathy the Uyghurs are receiving from the global media?
Yes and no. Yes, there are a lot more coverage now in the printed media, online media. But why it's not at the front? It's not like evening news. Why, when we turn on the TV, we don't see that's being covered? That frustrates me. And Hollywood is being very ineffective with this much atrocity. This is unprecedented atrocity of this century. When you look at after World War II, this is the largest targeted incarceration of one ethnic group after the World War II. But I don't see any kind of attention from major media, unlike evening news, daily news. It's picking up here and there, but not enough. So no, I'm not satisfied with the media coverage. This should be a front page news every day. This should be on the news every night on the TV and radio. Because 3 million people, that is more than the double of the population of the entire city of Adelaide. 3 million, that is not a small number. The Chinese government is getting away with this because of the media and the governments and the countries and the world leaders are not paying attention. Our first concentration camp in Lop Nor opened up in 2014 under the Strike Hard campaign. But when you look at last 20 months, it grew almost 500% because China is able to getting away at the front of entire world population. This is 21st century. This is 2019. So the ignorance or saying that we didn't know it is not excuse anymore, like what happened during the World War II. During the Holocaust.
Is it kind of like an inconvenient truth, though? I mean, again, going back to what we were saying earlier, the global community is so enmeshed in the Chinese dictatorship. We invest in it, we have factories, we have billions of dollars worth of trade with it, It's also spreading its tentacles out, as you rightly point out, with regard to the Belt and Road Initiative. It's the Leviathan. It is the thing that is so big. It's the monster, and we can't seem to work it out. It's unlike the times of World War II, where the Nazi state was pretty much its own thing in Europe. The Soviet Union was its own thing in Eurasia. It didn't have those links of trade outside. And so therefore the West felt that it could actually make them an enemy and take a stand. Whereas now we live in this grey area where it's, how do you take a stand against something where most of our devices come from the People's Republic? Most of our television sets, the things that we rely on, they're cheaply manufactured. Our economies are so dependent on them. If we were then to go against China in a significant way, the argument, of course, is we're going to have significant economic problems, right?
Well, if we really care for the basic rights of the human dignity and integrity, human rights should be the fundamental base for the most Western democratic countries. We should take some sacrifices. Doing business, continue to do business with China is complicit with genocide. Not only that, when the Western democratic countries, when they continue to do business with China, it's like China is getting rewarded for committing crimes against humanity. Not only that, when you look at the International Olympic Committee, China is the hosting country for 2022 Winter Olympics. The International Olympic Committee should respect and hold the principles of the Olympic Games based upon. The Olympic Games shouldn't be based upon which country has most money or influence or power. It should be the games of the celebration of unity and differences in the world. A country holding 3 million people, innocent people from one ethnic group that's racially and religiously targeted is the last country in the world qualifying for hosting such a special, unique games. Hosting rights of Beijing 2022 Olympics should be taken away, the Winter Olympics.
Has there already been a beginning of a process to try and arrange a boycott of 2022? Is that in motion yet, or is that something that the Uyghur community will be working towards over the next, say, 18, 24 months?
We started actually the Uyghur community not boycotting, but taking the hosting rights away.
Okay, so try and take the host rights away rather than convince individual countries.
Yeah.
Okay.
But disappointingly, while we are doing this, we just heard recently FIFA, the World Cup, is rewarded to Beijing again for 2021. What is going on? Is it all about China's money? Yes, Chinese government is investing heavily to the influential people, the politicians, and some of the experts and scholars and the media people, and they're just trying everything they can to silence the world and getting away with what they want. But the world community looks like playing right into China's plans. The Chinese government used to say that the last century is the century of humiliation, and this century is century of revenge against the Western people, Western countries, and we are not waking up. What does it take to wake up the world communities and to take a stand? I don't know, I'm running out of words to say, but I'm not going to quit. I'll keep talking.
What's the potential of sort of economic boycotts against particular Chinese companies that have won contracts to build and run, the camps in East Turkestan? Is it possible for a listener to go and find a list of companies that they can then try and not purchase things from? Or has this stuff all been made so murky that it's very difficult to identify a link between a company making something a Westerner might buy and a company working for the CCP?
No, there are many companies are being identified already. 28 companies that the United States blacklisted. We should continue that with the other countries. And the cotton, 84% of the cotton that China produced to the world, all coming from our homeland. So All that should be implemented. And also, with those concentration camps, the Chinese government is killing 4 birds with one stone. One, they are making those 3 million people work on production. It's modern-day slavery, basically advancing China's economy. 2, taking the Uyghur people, put them in the middle of nowhere, middle of deserts, in the concentration camps, vacating the Uyghur homes and the lands, reallocating the Uyghurs' lands to Han Chinese settlers. 3, when most of the Uyghur men are taken to the concentration camps, the abandoned Uyghur girls and the women are forced to marry Han Chinese. The girl nor the families able to reject such a forced marriage in fear of repercussions. 4, with the mandatory collection of the Uyghurs' DNA samples, the Chinese government is running organ harvesting farms with those camps. The Chinese government has every Uyghur people's DNA samples, blood samples, medical records. So they are winning. They are winning every way you look at it.
A dystopian nightmare. What explains the apathy that Muslim states have toward the Uyghurs? One would have thought that as a Muslim people, the Uyghurs would have received most of their sustained support from the Islamic community or the Ummah, from both a religious and political perspective. What's happened there?
China made a very true plan when they started this, as I mentioned earlier. They invested heavily in the Muslim majority countries. And also, with the false narratives and the disinformation, the many people, the Muslim community, Muslim Ummah, they don't know what's happening, including Turkey. The Turkish people, local Turkish people, they don't really know the reality. Most of those Muslim majority countries, the media is controlled by the government. So, of course, the Chinese government is using the other Hui Chinese people in the other part of China, showing that, they're fine, they're praying, there are mosques, and this is not, what we are doing is not against Islam or against religion. This is only against so-called radicalized Uyghurs. That's the Chinese narrative. And under the pretext of Islamic terrorism, they are trying to show the Muslim majority countries that those Uyghurs are conducting illegal Islamic activities. If the Muslim brothers and sisters in those Muslim majority countries only know that the Uyghurs are being attacked because of their just simple faith, because they exercise their faith as just ordinary Muslims, I'm sure they will be with us. Because there is a hadith in the Brotherhood that's all Muslims believe. The whole ummah is like one body, and any one part gets limped or sick, the entire body is supposed to react. Only if they know the Uyghur Muslims are being amputated from that body, I'm sure they're not going to leave us alone. I believe in that.
I would have to imagine, though, that one of the problems could be here that if Uyghurs start to resist, and resist with the assistance from the Muslim community worldwide, that the likelihood of the CCP labelling it as terrorism and trying to link it into the global war on terror could actually make it even potentially worse for Uyghurs. That it needs to be very broad, very public support, doesn't it, from the Muslim world to not be relabelled by the CCP.
One very interesting angle, just listening to all of this, I'm thinking to myself, well, there's what David said, but then there's also the other thing too, and I'm not sure whether or not the Uyghur diaspora have got outreach into the Jewish community, but you would think that if a potential genocide is taking place within China, it's still a genocide, and so therefore members of the Jewish community who have felt the sting of genocide themselves should come forward and help out. And again, it would then broaden your level of support, not necessarily to have them all Muslim, but at least to have a significant non-Muslim and, dare I say, partisan against genocide people coming forward and helping out. Has there been any outreach?
Yes, we have a lot of work to do. We just need to reach out to more and more Jewish communities and the synagogues. we do get a support whoever we speak to. I was in Kentucky and I talked at the synagogue there. And there is a Jewish youth group called Uyghur Rally in New York. And we work closely with them on our raising awareness work. And I have a contact with one of the Holocaust survival, actually, Sammy Steinman. He lives in New York, and I invited him to our rally in Washington, D.C. on April 6, 2019. So we need all the support from the Jewish communities and the other interfaith organizations, because China's war against religion is not just stopping with the war on Islam. They are also persecuting Christians, Chinese Christians, and the Catholics and the Buddhists, the Tibetan Buddhists. Because China is a totalitarian communist regime, any kind of original thought or faith, belief in God, or believe any kind of religion is threat to a communist regime. So basically, if we want to continue to practice our faith and pray to the God that we call with different names, we have to stand up and hold China accountable for its actions. Unless if we do something before it's too late, then never again, the vow never again is happening all over again. Unless if we follow up with the real actions, the vow never again is going to be just empty words.
Yeah, it's incredible to think at the moment that Bosnia went through all of this in the mid-1990s. So it's not even a generation. So it's fresh in the European minds. They've got all the systems in place to be able to shine multiple bright lights on this issue from a multi-faith perspective, from a multicultural perspective. And yet it seems that they talk about it as little as anyone else.
The Europeans are in a very weak position, both strategically, economically, and again, you're looking at the power of Chinese money at the moment. That buys you a lot of silence.
Yeah, but moral high ground in Western Europe is what they specialise in.
Yeah, well,
so they're not even managing to do what they specialise in.
Yeah.
And another thing, like UK or other European countries signing up for Belt and Road Initiative, they are very naively thinking that signing up for Belt and Road Initiative is going to create jobs or help the local economy. No, that's not going to happen, because the Chinese government is bringing Chinese workers with those projects. So it's only going to help Chinese economy. So basically, all these countries, without realizing, signing up for colonization and the Han Chinese settlers massively moving into those countries. At the end of the game, there's going to be only one winner and one loser in China's Belt and Road Initiative plan. And China always wants to be the winner. So who's going to be the loser?
Are there any ideas of the numbers of transmigration from, China proper into East Turkestan? How many people have already moved, or are they planning to move, or is that something that hasn't been leaked yet?
Because of the information blockade, it is difficult to know exactly, but yes, massive immigration of the Han Chinese settlers to East Turkestan, as far as we know.
Because you look at sort of, when the railway line was built to Tibet, and in the West it was all this courage of, oh, what an amazing railway line. It's that high you have to warm the rails. It's that high you have to pressurise the cars. Why would they build this? It was like the West didn't ever have the penny drop that the principal advantage of building the rail line was transmigration. It was built for a reason.
Yeah. It reminded me of something, actually, what you said. Just a couple of months before the 9/11 tragedy in United States, the Chinese government was advertising heavily to the Western countries, asking the Western countries to invest in East Turkestan, saying that this is the most peaceful and the beautiful country with peaceful and friendly people. And then, right after 9/11, they realized here's the ample opportunity to get rid of the Uyghur people. So they just turn around and overnight they claim to be the victim of the war on terror.
Yeah,
so now, using that pretext, setting up the complete Orwellian surveillance police state, with not just the 3 million Uyghurs in the concentration camps facing intense indoctrinations, forced indoctrination, and the physical and the mental torture, but just the general public, the regular people living daily lives, subject to facial recognition softwares, ubiquitous cameras, GPS tracking devices on every vehicle, QR scanning codes on every Uyghur homes. And also the Chinese media reported 1.1 million Han Chinese officials moved into the Uyghur homes. They live with them, monitor their daily activities, supervised their lives in their homes. And with all that, the Chinese government is getting away with under the Islamophobia and the war on terror.
Yeah, it was incredible after 9/11 when the Shanghai Cooperation Organization was set up, that here was a way essentially, it seemed, for the Putin regime to control the Chechens. And China got on board immediately and the CCP looked real happy. But from a Western perspective, no one seemed clear who the CCP's target was going to be to take advantage of the opportunity. It took a lot more time, and still, as we've spoken about today, the West really hasn't become aware of how so many situations since 9/11 have been used to take advantage of Western fear, the general lack of Western understanding and appreciation about Islam as an excuse to maintain ignorance.
Yes, under that pretext, the Chinese government is announcing to the world openly that they are sinifying Islam with the communist ideologies. How in the world any religion, not just Islam, any religion can be compatible with communist atheist ideologies? The Chinese ambassador to the United States, Ambassador Cui, he said clearly to a reporter when there was an article in CNN, he said, with those re-education camps, we are making Uyghurs as normal persons. So everything made the Uyghurs unique. The Uyghurs' language, culture, their history, their religion, in front of the Chinese communist atheist government, made Uyghurs abnormality, non-normal people. And with all that, they are getting away at the front of the entire world communities. So what's going to take to get the attention? What do we need to do?
Rushan, much has been said in the international media about what's happening in the PRC with regard to the Uyghurs. But from an outsider's perspective, what is the end point of the Uyghur struggle? I mean, is it the independence of East Turkestan? Is it federal China, post-communist federal China and autonomy? I mean, what is it that you're struggling for? I mean, we understand that there's oppression. We understand all of that. But is there a strategic endpoint for the Uyghur struggle? Is there something that the West needs to know about the struggle that we can understand in very clear and succinct ways?
Right now, for the Uyghur people in East Turkestan, it's about survival. It's about existence. The Chinese government tried to eradicate the Uyghur people. The Uyghurs are left the only option with either you live as Han Chinese, we allow you to survive, or you die in the camps as a Uyghur. So right now, the world needs to stand up and save those Uyghurs. So then we can think about what's next.
Right.
So cultural survival really at the moment is the only game in town.
Thank you.
One last question, if I may. During the Cold War, the US and the West reached an agreement with the Soviet Union that in a way kind of legitimized some of the USSR's international interests and standing, with the quid pro quo being that it would treat its minorities and general citizenry better. That was known as the Helsinki Accords, and that was brought into being in 1975. While we are not technically in a Cold War with the PRC, we are in many ways in a cold peace, as tensions between the West and the PRC have escalated sharply in recent years. Do you think that the creation of a détente between Beijing and Washington could provide the background for a new style of Helsinki Accord, whereby human rights and political freedoms of Uyghurs and other minorities in China can be better taken care of?
What the Chinese government is doing today is not just the abuse of the human rights for the Uyghurs or Tibetans, especially for the Uyghurs, with the 3 million people in the concentration camps, with almost 1 million Uyghur children are taken to orphanages, with the Uyghur women forced to marry Han Chinese. This is about eradication of an ethnicity. So unless if the world stand up and they stop this genocide before it's too late. I call it genocide because if you look at the United Nations Genocide Convention implemented in 1948, and China is actually one of the signatories, there's 5 elements to recognize a genocide if one of the elements is being conducted against one ethnic group. You can find all 5 elements. So China is conducting genocide. Continue to do business with China, not standing up and stop what China is doing today is complicit with genocide. So it may, such a treaty or setting up similar tact, but to me, the communist regime knows what they are doing, and it's not just the Uyghurs' future is at stake here. The entire Western democracy and the world population's freedom is at stake. So we shouldn't be wasting time on something like that anymore, unless if we want to just give in and they live like those Uyghurs. Just look at what the Uyghurs are living. Look at what the Uyghurs are facing today and imagine what kind of world that we are living for our future generations, for our kids, for our grandkids. So the world population's future is at stake here. So we need to do something before it's too late.
Rushan Abbas, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening, everyone. We hope that you'll join us for our next exciting adventure through the world of geopolitics. Remember that you can subscribe to Strategikon through the Ozcast network, iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn and Spotify, and please like us on the Sage International Australia Facebook site and follow us on Twitter. We appreciate your support. Also, please comment on any of our articles and podcasts through Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and of course on the Sage International Australia site. We welcome any constructive feedback that can help improve our products, and we look forward to engaging with our followers. Also, if you would like to support Strategikon, remember to check out our merch page. We have a wide variety of items to keep the Strategikon listeners satisfied. Until next time, goodbye.
Connect with your potential customers wherever they are. Effective uses Comcast viewership data insights to combine advanced targeting capabilities with premium TV and streaming content, so you can deliver the best ad experiences to your audience no matter how they watch. Visit EFFECTV.com.
Love this podcast? Support it and sponsor today. Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.